I was suddenly lost and alone. Hood, my guide, had warned me of the loose earth along the edge of the river, yet it was he who plummeted into the icy water, along with the horse and all it carried. I found myself with little food, some water, and no idea where I was, much less which direction to go. As I was about to give in to despair, I remembered Hood's words from the night before. We'd been sitting around the campfire when I spoke of my fear of being alone in the wilderness. He leaned in and said, "The important thing in survival situation is to prioritize your basic needs. The easiest way to do that is to remember the rule of 3. You can live for 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, and 3 months without hope." His words echoed in my ear as I took a deep breath. "Air," I said to myself. "Shelter," I added, pulling my woolen cloak around me. "Water," I continued, feeling the water's skin hanging over my shoulder. With a sudden thought, I reached to my side and felt the bag of jerky there that Hood had insisted I carry. I sobbed with relief. Food. I was not as bad off as I thought. I wasn't out of the woods yet, but maybe, just maybe, I could see a faint glimmer of hope. "Thank you, Hood," I whispered at the sky as I started walking. This is the introduction to the Elements chapter in Cinematic Environs Survival Skills, their supplement for D&D 5th edition, but also any sort of fantasy role-playing game to help you bring your wilderness to life, the skills you need to survive in a wilderness. The book, this supplement is broken into about 4 different sections. The introduction, which includes levels of realism you want, a description of conditions, and some from the player's handbook, others that they introduce for higher levels of realism, and the basics of survival. Then there's a section on weather with weather charts and the effects of weather. Then there's the main chapter that I'd call that they call the elements. It's basically the air, the body temperature or shelter, water, food, and hope that you need to survive. And there's a lot of detail under each of those subheadings. Then the final part of the book is on encounter ideas. There are 100 encounter ideas for when you're traveling and 100 for when you're resting in the wilderness. And then there's a new background and some legal information, a character sheet, and some information on DBJ, Davy Bryan Jackson. So for a more detailed description of what's in this supplement, down in the description below, I'll put a link to DBJ, Davy Bryan Jackson's video about this supplement, where he describes in more detail than I the various parts of the book. I'll go on to just describe what I like and disliked, because there's more that I like than dislike. I'll start with what I dislike. The extra mechanics, I don't think there's quite a lot of extra mechanics for making it more gritty and realistic. I don't mind gritty, I don't mind realistic, but I'm not a fan of bookkeeping, so I don't think I'll be tracking strength as tracking diminishing strength as food runs out, or other burn injuries, various levels of despair. They even go into calories. I certainly won't be tracking calories that they eat. He doesn't really suggest that in a game of D&D. Well, he says it's an element if you want to, but the overall, I think this is a slight negative. There's an overall effect that it seems that by trying to make it more realistic and keeping track of everything that will influence your chances of surviving, it may just end up feeling or suggesting that the game that they're describing is a game of bookkeeping, of describing this being worn away and this being whittled down, a game of sort of horror survival of wilderness in a wilderness environment. Let's see, any other negatives? So these are elements that I won't be using, or I'll be changing the emphasis of how I use them. Another element, because I don't really want to add more rules, and I'll be introducing a lot of these things into an existing campaign, but we all came together to play D&D, which has a certain, not a very realistic level of realism in it, and I don't want to suddenly change the balance of that to a different type of game. We signed up for D&D. I want to keep it very D&D style. But that doesn't mean that there won't be vast amounts of books that I'll use. I'll just throw in one other thing that I didn't like. The name, I thought, it's only a minor detail, but the name of the chapter, Elements, I think didn't actually capture there are 5 things, not 4 elements, not the 4 elements. There was the elements they have are air, fire, water, earth, and spirit. 5 elements from the original 4, but really they are air. The things you can't do without for 3 minutes, 3 hours, 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months are air. They say shelter or basically it's core temperature that you must protect. Water, food, and hope. I probably won't be using despair either. I can throw that up. I'll throw some ideas of despair. I may use it in the future because they're going towards a desert, and at some stage they're going to get into a desert where the time scale of months may come into play and the despair might start becoming a factor. But I'm not going to force it on them. I'll throw it in as an option and see if the players are interested in taking up that element of the environment. If not, I'm not going to push it because it is D&D we're playing. Saying that, the positives, this book is absolutely chock full of challenges that a wilderness environment can throw at a party, but not just the challenges, not just the dangers, but tactics and things that people who are skilled at wilderness survival can do to overcome those risks. There are 3, according to the player's handbook, there are 3 pillars of role-playing. There's combat, social interaction, and exploration. Exploration is vast, but one element of it is traveling in the wilderness. And with this supplement, you're provided with a huge number of tools to throw challenges at your players and possible ways of dealing with those challenges. That characters that are skilled in wilderness, rangers, not bards, rangers, barbarians, druids, and the outlander background characters would have to overcome the threats of the wilderness, the problems of the wilderness. And so just over the time of GMing and that I've been playing role-playing games, I've learned a vocabulary to describe combat, describe weapons. I know combat, I know spells, I know different vocabulary to describe spells, and I'm quite happy with the way I present things and the responses that most players give. I'm not so comfortable in providing challenges of wilderness. Now this gives me a lot of ammunition to throw dangers in the way of players, and if they themselves do not have the knowledge, I can let them make rolls and then give them possible different tactics to use to overcome these challenges, and thus we can explore another area of the game more fully. And there's all sorts of encounter ideas that I'd like to now throw at my wilderness. I've got a ranger in my game, and I basically want to any skill that any of my player characters have, I'd like to present them with the opportunity to use it, and show what a badass they are with that skill. I'm, one element I'm thinking of is basically they come across some invincible foe who is out after them. It's much too powerful, much too strong for them to cope with at the moment, or maybe they just have no way of dealing with them. But if the ranger-led party leads them into a wilderness which is difficult to survive, but he helps his small party to survive, and they overcome the challenges of the wilderness, but this large invincible foe is gradually weakened and weakened until they're at a stage where the party can actually attack them. They're at, even if I just use the basic rules, exhaustion as it builds up can become deadlier and deadlier. They could even just absolutely kill them outright with exhaustion, or the enemies could actually surrender just because of the will. They've reached such a level of exhaustion that they know they won't survive unless the player characters help them and show them how to survive in this environment. A way for wilderness survival to turn badass. Anyway, I think the three of them, DBJ, Alex, and Rob, have produced a really useful supplement that I'll be using both as a player when I'm playing my wilderness characters, and as a GM to challenge my wilderness characters, and I recommend it highly. My name's Caius. I love role-playing games, and I hope to see you in one in the future.